I walked across the stage in my cap and gown, trying to keep my smile steady as my heart hammered in my chest. The auditorium was packed with proud families, laughter, and the buzz of excitement, but all I could feel was a hollow pit in my stomach. My parents sat a few rows ahead, clapping half-heartedly, their eyes glinting with the usual favoritism I'd grown used to. When it came time for gifts, my twin sister's name was called first. Their faces lit up as they handed her a thick envelope and a glossy brochure. "A trip to Europe," they announced proudly. Her eyes sparkled as she hugged them, practically bouncing with excitement. I forced a smile, clapping along, trying to mask the sinking feeling in my chest. And then, mine. A tiny crumpled gift card slid into my hand. $10. 10 measly dollars. My fingers shook as I stared at it. I wanted to laugh, cry, scream all at once. The auditorium noises faded into a dull hum, my mind spinning. How could they? How could they be so blatant, so cruel? I glanced at my sister again. She was beaming, oblivious to my humiliation. People around me were smiling, chatting, taking pictures, but I felt frozen, like the world had shrunk down to that $10 piece of plastic in my hand. My cheeks burned, and I looked down at my hands as if the embarrassment could disappear if I just stared hard enough. Part of me wanted to run, escape the applause, the flashing cameras, the judgmental glances of strangers. Another part wanted to lash out, demand an explanation, shake my parents until they realized the injustice. But instead, I swallowed the lump in my throat, nodded politely, and mouthed a quiet, "Thank you," as my parents smiled smugly. That night, lying in bed, I replayed the scene over and over. The unfairness burned like acid in my chest. My parents had made it clear. She was the golden child and I was nothing. But as the anger settled into a simmering fire, I realized something. Maybe this time I wouldn't stay in the shadows. Maybe this time I'd find a way to make them regret underestimating me. A small, wicked smile tugged at the corners of my lips. They didn't know what was coming. After the graduation ceremony ended and the crowd began to disperse, I slipped away from the throng of smiling families and chattering graduates. The applause and laughter felt distant now, like they belonged to someone else. I found an empty corner in the lobby and sank onto a bench, clutching that ridiculous $10 gift card as if it were some cruel talisman. I couldn't stop thinking about all the times this had happened before. My birthdays, my report cards, my achievements, always overshadowed, always compared to my sister, always a step behind in my parents' eyes. My 10th birthday, she had received a shiny bicycle while I got a generic jump rope. The years rolled on, and the pattern never changed. Honor roll certificates tucked away in drawers, my hard work dismissed with a shrug. She did better on the test, my mom would say, smiling at my sister. "Next time, honey," my dad would add absent-mindedly. I hugged my knees and let the memories wash over me like a tide. The science fair where I won first place, only to watch my sister receive a cash prize and a ribbon for participation. The college acceptance letters carefully hidden in the mail pile until she opened hers in a ceremony they had somehow organized just for her. Every moment, every triumph I had, seemed smaller to them, like it could never be as important as hers. A bitter ache rose in my chest. I had tried, over and over, to get them to notice me, to value me, to simply acknowledge that I existed and mattered, but they never did. And now, this graduation gift, so public, so blatant, was another confirmation of what I already knew. I had been invisible in the house that was supposed to be mine too. But somewhere beneath the sting of humiliation, beneath the resentment that had been simmering for years, a tiny spark ignited. Maybe it was anger. Maybe it was the realization that their favoritism didn't define me. I was tired of living in the shadow of my twin, tired of being measured against her as if I were just a footnote in their lives. A plan began to form in the quiet of that empty lobby. I would prove to them, and maybe to myself, that I wasn't someone to be ignored, that the girl they undervalued, the one they dismissed so easily, could rise above their favoritism and make them see what they had overlooked all these years. I tucked the gift card into my wallet, not as a symbol of shame, but as a reminder. They had underestimated me, and that was their first mistake. For the first time that day, a determined smile spread across my face. They had no idea what was coming. The aroma of roasted chicken and mashed potatoes filled the dining room, but I barely noticed. I sat stiffly at the table, my hands folded in my lap, while my parents hovered over my twin sister like she was some prized trophy. "You did amazing at graduation. Sweetie," my mom cooed, passing her the wine glass. "A trip to Europe is just the beginning of your success. We're so proud of you." My sister beamed, her eyes sparkling as if the entire world revolved around her. I forced a polite smile, picking at the vegetables on my plate. "And you," my dad added, glancing at me briefly before turning back to my sister. "Your $10 gift card is practical. I'm sure you'll make good use of it." I felt heat rise in my chest, a mix of anger and humiliation. Practical? $10? After all these years of ignoring my achievements, my award-winning science project, my scholarships, the promotions I'd worked so hard for, none of it seemed to matter. I'm happy for her," I muttered, trying to keep my voice steady. "You should be," my mom replied, almost dismissively. "She's really going places." I clenched my fists under the table, tasting the bitterness on my tongue. Every compliment from my sister was another reminder that I was invisible in my own family. My accomplishments were background noise, barely worth acknowledgement. I just wish, sometimes, I trailed off, realizing the words wouldn't come. I couldn't tell them how invisible I felt, how small I'd always been in their eyes. My sister laughed at a joke my father made, oblivious to the tension at the table. I watched her, the unfairness of it all coiling tighter in my chest. How could they celebrate her while barely noticing me? As dinner continued, I felt a shift inside me. The familiar sadness was still there, but now it was tinged with something sharper: determination. I wasn't going to sit quietly forever, watching her life get all the attention while mine was brushed aside. Maybe it was time to stop waiting for them to see me. Maybe it was time to show them, and everyone else, exactly what they'd been ignoring all these years. I glanced around the table one last time, my resolve hardening. They thought I was insignificant. They thought I'd always be the overlooked twin. They were about to find out how wrong they were. And in that quiet moment, beneath the hum of conversation and clinking silverware, I made my first mental plan. I wouldn't let this injustice slide. Not anymore. The next step wasn't clear yet. But one thing was certain. I was done being invisible. I met Maya at our usual coffee shop, the one with the chipped blue mugs and the faded couch in the corner. She looked up from her latte and gave me that look, the one that said she already knew something was wrong without me having to explain. I slid into the seat opposite her, and before I could stop myself, everything spilled out. "They gave her a trip to Europe," I said, voice small. "And me, $10. A gift card." Maya's eyebrows shot up. $10? Are you serious? She stared at me like I'd told her the sky had fallen. That's cruel. That's humiliating. It felt like a joke, I admitted, like I don't exist to them. All the things I worked for, scholarships, awards, promotions, none of it matters. I rolled the $10 gift card between my fingers, remembering the auditorium lights, my parents' smug smiles. They act like she's some golden child and I'm the afterthought. Maya reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You don't have to say anything else. I see you. I've seen you fight for everything while they treat her like royalty." Her voice was low, fierce. "You deserve better than a $10 card." Her validation felt like balm to a wound that never fully healed. For the first time that day, I didn't feel foolish for being hurt. I felt seen, so what now? Maya asked. "You can't let it go, right?" I hesitated. Part of me wanted to storm back into their living room and demand an explanation. Part of me wanted to post something passive-aggressive online and watch them squirm. But Maya's practical face, always the strategist, nudged me toward something cleaner, smarter. "Not a scene," I said. "No drama. I want them to notice me without me begging for it. I want it to be undeniable." Maya grinned, that slow, conspiratorial smile I trusted. "Make it public. Quietly public. Get recognized where they can't ignore you. Work, community, social media, somewhere the world has to applaud you. and they'll either have to keep pretending or be exposed. Her words sparked a dozen ideas in my head. An award ceremony where I'd be introduced as a keynote speaker, a charity gala where my name would be on the donor list, a LinkedIn post that trended because of a big promotion. Nothing petty. Something that would force them to reconcile the image they'd built with the person I actually was. You think that'll work? I asked, more hopeful than I'd felt in weeks. It'll make them uncomfortable, Maya said. And uncomfortable is the first step toward them admitting they were wrong. She leaned in. You've been underestimated your whole life. It's time they learned the cost of that mistake. I let the idea settle. For the first time since the graduation, I felt a focused heat behind my chest, less like pain and more like purpose. Okay, I said finally, feeling the plan take shape. First thing, get something they can't ignore. Something loud enough that their favoritism looks petty in comparison. Maya nodded, already pulling out her phone to brainstorm timelines. As she talked, my mind raced with possibilities. This wasn't revenge for revenge's sake. I told myself that, but a reclamation of my worth. And this time, I intended to win on my terms. In the weeks after graduation, I threw myself into my work like a woman possessed. Every project I touched, every deadline I met, I did with precision and quiet determination. My parents were oblivious as usual. I'd call home once in a while to update them on my achievements, but their responses were shallow and dismissive. You got another promotion? My mom asked one evening over the phone, her tone polite but lukewarm. That's nice, dear. My father predictably didn't even comment. Meanwhile, my sister posted photos on social media of her fun adventures and vacations. Each time I scrolled past, my stomach twisted, but instead of feeling defeated, I turned it into fuel. My achievements weren't flashy or for show. They were substance, discipline, progress. And I was quietly stacking them, one after another, building momentum in ways my family couldn't or wouldn't see. I joined a community art program on the weekends, pouring my frustration into watercolor paintings that captured raw emotion, scenes of loneliness, of injustice, of triumph. Each piece became a small victory, a testament to the strength I had forged alone. My parents never attended the exhibitions, never asked about my shows, and certainly never complimented me. But strangers did. They lingered, they asked questions, they recognized my skill, and every word of praise felt like a quiet rebuke to the family that had always overlooked me. Even at work, my efforts began to stand out. I was assigned leadership roles, commended in team meetings, and recognized by upper management. Yet when I mentioned any of it at home, the conversations were short and dismissive. That's great, honey, my mom said once while scrolling on her phone. But have you heard what your sister did today? It would have been easy to feel small, to sink back into the familiar ache of neglect. But something inside me had shifted. I realized I didn't need their validation to succeed. I only needed it to sting enough to remind me why I had to. Each accomplishment, each recognition outside the walls of my home, was a stepping stone toward the reckoning I'd started planning in that empty coffee shop with Maya. By the time the semester ended, my work portfolio was impressive. I had been featured in a local magazine for a community initiative I led, and my paintings had sold for more than I ever expected. The contrast between my life and my sister's curated social media adventures was stark. My achievements were real, substantive, lasting. Hers were shiny, fleeting, and dependent on my parents' approval. And yet, she remained blissfully unaware of the quiet fire I had stoked. She continued to receive their praise and attention, oblivious to the storm brewing quietly beneath my calm exterior. Every time I caught a glimpse of her online, I reminded myself, this wasn't about boasting or revenge just yet. It was about preparation, building a foundation so solid, so undeniable that when the time came, my parents and my sister couldn't ignore it. Every promotion, every recognition, every small victory was a brushstroke in the masterpiece of my silent reclamation, and with each step forward, anticipation grew. I could feel the tide shifting. I was no longer invisible. I was preparing for the moment when they would finally see me, and not just as the overlooked twin, but as someone they could never underestimate again. It started like any other Monday morning, coffee in hand, inbox open, and a to-do list longer than my patience. But by midday, my phone buzzed with notifications, congratulatory messages from coworkers, and even a few from clients I barely knew. I had been promoted to project lead, a role that came with public recognition, increased responsibility, and a noticeable boost in salary. I smiled quietly, savoring the small thrill that came from achievement untainted by family approval. For the first time, I realized the depth of the contrast. While my sister's accolades were often orchestrated by our parents, mine were earned, tangible, and recognized outside the narrow confines of home. That evening, I called Maya to celebrate. "You did it," she said, excitement in her voice. "You've officially outgrown their little hierarchy." "Yes," I replied, feeling the weight of it. "And they have no idea yet. They'll hear about it secondhand, like they always do, and this time, I think it will sting." Sure enough, the next day, I overheard my mother on the phone with her friend. "Did you hear about—" "Oh, never mind, it's not important," she said, trailing off as if she couldn't quite process it. Later, my father muttered something to a neighbor about how my promotion came out of nowhere, his tone a mixture of pride and confusion. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had built this world outside their approval, and yet now they were forced to confront it, even if reluctantly. At work, I stood at the front of a meeting room, presenting a successful project outcome. My team applauded, the clients nodded in approval, and my manager gave a subtle, proud smile. It was in that room, amid professional recognition, that I truly felt the shift. I wasn't just surviving their favoritism, I was thriving in spite of it. The contrast burned quietly in the back of my mind. My sister had just posted a picture of herself with a new handbag, basking in the ephemeral attention of likes and comments. Meanwhile, my achievements were permanent, meaningful, and undeniable. My parents could no longer pretend that I didn't exist, even if they wanted to. That night, I replayed the moment in my mind, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and anticipation. Their delayed realization would hit them slowly, like a wave rolling toward shore. They might try to dismiss it, downplay it, even compare it to my sister's successes, but the seed of recognition had been planted. And when it grew, there would be no stopping it. I allowed myself a private smile. This was the first real taste of quiet revenge. Not a confrontation, not a dramatic reveal, but a subtle, powerful reminder that I could excel without their validation. Every congratulatory email, every handshake, every note of appreciation outside the family was a small crack in the illusion they had built. That my sister was always the better child. As I set my phone down and leaned back in my chair, I realized that the game had changed. They thought ignoring me would keep me small. They were wrong, very wrong, and the best part, they had no idea what was coming next. I sat at my desk late one night, the apartment quiet except for the soft hum of the city outside. My laptop glowed, spreadsheets and calendar apps open, as I mapped out the first steps of what I now thought of as my masterstroke. This wasn't just about recognition. It was about exposure, about showing my parents, finally, that their favoritism had blinded them to who I really was. Flashbacks flitted through my mind, reminders of every slight I'd endured, the skipped birthdays, the overlooked awards, the subtle comments that chipped away at my confidence. And yet, all those moments had taught me something invaluable. Patience. Cunning. The ability to wait for the perfect moment when the stakes were high, and the impact would be undeniable. I pulled out a notebook and began listing options. Gala events in the city where my achievements could be celebrated. Networking functions with local media that might cover my work. Award ceremonies I could attend, quietly submitted under my own merit. The key, I realized, was subtlety. Not a scene. Not a tantrum. Something public enough to leave them scrambling, yet executed with elegance. Each idea brought a thrill of anticipation. I pictured their faces. The shock, the confusion, maybe even a hint of regret. I could see my sister's smugness faltering as they were forced to acknowledge my accomplishments. For years I had been the invisible twin, the overlooked one, the background character in my own life. But now the spotlight would shift, whether they liked it or not. I paused to visualize the event. It would need to be strategic. I'd invite a few colleagues, maybe a mentor, just enough witnesses to make the recognition undeniable. A post on social media could amplify it, professional, classy, and impossible to ignore. Every step of the plan had to be calculated, executed with precision. The more I thought about it, the more the plan took shape. I could see myself standing tall, the subtle applause around me, their faces frozen in realization. It wasn't just about humiliation. It was about justice, the quiet, undeniable validation of years of effort that had gone unrecognized. By the time I closed my notebook, I felt a mix of exhilaration and calm. This was no impulsive act. It was a calculated move in a larger game, and unlike the reckless tantrums of my youth, this would leave no room for argument. No denial, only truth. For the first time in my life, I felt fully in control. Every slight, every overlooked achievement, every moment of favoritism had led to this, my opportunity to reclaim my worth on my own terms. I leaned back in my chair, letting the thought sink in. The quiet rebellion had begun, and soon, very soon, everyone would see exactly who I had become and exactly what they had been missing all along. The night of the gala arrived, and I felt a thrill coursing through my veins. The venue sparkled under crystal chandeliers, a sea of impeccably dressed professionals mingling, laughing, and exchanging business cards. I had orchestrated every detail, my achievements highlighted in the event program, a small announcement by the organizers about my recent promotion, and subtle social media coverage so that even the most oblivious onlookers, my parents included, couldn't ignore it. I spotted them the moment they entered. My mother's eyes widened at the elegantly decorated ballroom, and my father straightened his tie, a faint frown tugging at the corners of his mouth. They hadn't expected me to invite them, but social etiquette demanded they attend, especially when mutual acquaintances mentioned my name. They looked around, scanning the crowd, uncertain, as if trying to locate me in this world they had never truly seen. The program began, and the announcer's voice echoed over the speakers. Tonight, we honor rising professionals making remarkable contributions in our community. Please welcome protagonist's name. I stepped forward with a calm smile, acknowledging polite applause from the crowd. But it wasn't just the applause that mattered. It was the recognition itself. Every handshake, every nod, every congratulatory glance was a statement. I existed. I mattered. And for once, they couldn't diminish it. As I accepted the brief award, a plaque acknowledging my professional accomplishments, I caught my parents' expressions out of the corner of my eye. Shock, confusion, something akin to panic. My mother's mouth opened and closed like she was trying to form words but couldn't. My father shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable under the attention they couldn't control. I allowed myself a small, controlled smile. I had imagined this moment countless times. The contrast between the $10 gift card I had received at graduation and the recognition I now held in my hands. The irony wasn't lost on me, and I could feel the energy in the room amplify it. Whispers rippled through the audience as colleagues and friends noticed the subtle dynamics at play. "Did you see her parents' faces?" One whispered, and another nodded in agreement. I could see them taking mental notes, aware that something deeper was unfolding. A family's favoritism laid bare, exposed not by confrontation, but by undeniable accomplishment. After the applause died down, I mingled effortlessly, shaking hands, exchanging pleasantries, all while my parents hovered awkwardly near the periphery. Every interaction I had, every compliment I received, drove the point home. I had outgrown the narrow world where I had been invisible. Later, as I checked social media, notifications flooded in, pictures of the event, mentions of my promotion, and comments praising my work. The posts were subtle enough not to seem boastful, but public enough that my parents could no longer ignore them. Each like, comment, and share was a tiny ripple of validation, echoing the quiet but powerful message, "You undervalued me, but now the world sees my worth." By the end of the evening, my parents had retreated to a corner, whispered conversations betraying their discomfort. My sister hovered nearby, unsure how to respond, caught between pride and jealousy. I felt a quiet satisfaction, a warm sense of vindication. For years, I had been overlooked, dismissed, and underestimated. Tonight, everything changed. The $10 gift card was no longer a symbol of humiliation. It was the starting point of my triumph. And as I walked out of the gala, plaque in hand, I knew this was only the beginning of them understanding who I truly was. Later that evening, after the gala had quieted down and most of the guests had left, I found my sister standing by the buffet, awkwardly clutching a plate of uneaten food. Her smile was forced, a thin veil over the confusion I could see flickering in her eyes. "Wow," she said finally, her voice tight. "I didn't realize you'd done all this." I raised an eyebrow, keeping my tone calm, almost casual. "You didn't?" I asked. "I suppose all those achievements over the years just didn't register, huh?" She opened her mouth, then closed it, unsure how to respond. I could see the jealousy beginning to bubble beneath the surface. Her eyes darted to the plaque in my hand, to the congratulatory messages on my phone, to the subtle nods of approval from mutual friends. She had always been the golden child, but tonight, that title was ambiguous at best. I mean, congratulations," she stammered finally, but it lacked conviction. The words felt heavy, awkward, like admitting a truth she had never had to face before. That I had been overlooked for far too long. "You know," I said softly, letting the silence stretch between us. "It's funny. I spent so many years in the background, trying to get noticed, trying to get approval I never really received. And now, well, I guess people notice me anyway." Her jaw tightened. "I didn't think it would be like this," she admitted, voice low. I thought I'd always be the one shining." I smiled, a small knowing curve of my lips. "You were always shining, yes. But sometimes, when someone else grows quietly in the shadows, their light eventually reaches the same room, and sometimes it outshines the one who never expected competition." She looked down, fidgeting with her fingers. Guilt and envy mingled in her expression. I could see the shift, the recognition that she had taken for granted the invisible effort I'd been putting in all these years. She wanted to respond, to defend herself, maybe even to justify the favoritism, but I let the silence speak louder than words. "Enjoy the night," I said finally, voice calm but firm. "It's a good reminder that being overlooked doesn't mean you're unimportant." Her eyes flicked up at me one last time, a mixture of disbelief and begrudging admiration. And in that moment, I felt it. The quiet satisfaction of an underdog finally stepping into the light, of someone long dismissed claiming her place without a scene, without drama, just undeniable truth. She didn't know how to handle it, and that was exactly how it should be. As I walked away to join friends congratulating me, I felt a surge of empowerment. The dynamics had shifted, subtly but permanently. For the first time, I wasn't just the overlooked twin. I was the one who had quietly won. The next evening, I invited my parents over under the pretense of a casual dinner. They arrived slightly tense, clearly aware of the shift in dynamics after the gala. My mother's smile was polite, and my father's usual confident posture seemed just a fraction off kilter. They didn't yet realize this dinner would not be like the others. I served the meal, letting the clatter of silverware and the hum of conversation settle into a quiet rhythm. Then I spoke, calm and deliberate. "Mom, Dad, we need to talk," I began, keeping my tone measured. They looked up, startled, the casual expectation of this being a simple family dinner evaporating instantly. I continued, choosing each word carefully. "For years I've tried to get your attention. I've worked hard, excelled in school, and built a career I'm proud of. And yet, time and again, I've been overlooked, dismissed, or ignored. Meanwhile, my sister's every accomplishment is celebrated as if she alone matters." I saw the flicker of discomfort in their eyes, that uneasy awareness they usually avoided. But I didn't pause. I let the words settle, giving them space to feel the weight of truth. "I remember birthdays you forgot, awards you barely acknowledged, moments when your favoritism was clear, moments I pretended not to notice because I wanted to believe you loved me equally. And now, even tonight, after my recognition at the gala, you're here as if nothing has changed. as if my years of effort are still invisible. My mother opened her mouth, then closed it. My father's jaw tightened. I could see the internal struggle, guilt, denial, and confusion fighting against pride. But I didn't let them interrupt. "This isn't about being dramatic," I said softly but firmly. "It's about accountability. It's about finally acknowledging the way your favoritism shaped our lives. You made choices that hurt me, that undermined my confidence, and I've had to find my own way, often alone. And yet here I am. I succeeded despite you." I took a deep breath and allowed a small pause for emphasis. The $10 gift card at my graduation, it wasn't just a gift. It was the embodiment of years of neglect and undervaluation. Tonight my accomplishments are visible, undeniable. You can't ignore them anymore. I saw my father's eyes narrow, a mixture of defensiveness and recognition. My mother's fingers fidgeted with her napkin, betraying a rare vulnerability. I realized then how much power had shifted. I was no longer a passive participant in this family dynamic. I was asserting myself firmly, clearly, without malice, only truth. "And I'm not asking for your praise anymore," I added, my voice unwavering. "I've found validation elsewhere, from people who recognize my worth. But I needed you to hear this, to understand that favoritism has consequences, that neglect isn't invisible, and that the world outside your narrow view has noticed me." I paused, letting my words sink in. The room was silent except for the soft clink of cutlery on plates, and in that silence I felt it, justice, quiet but complete. They couldn't erase the recognition, the respect I had earned. The moral and karmic scales had shifted, and for once they were on the receiving end of discomfort. I smiled calmly, finally allowing myself a sense of satisfaction. Not vengeance in the cruel sense, but truth revealed, awareness forced, accountability imposed. For the first time, I wasn't just the overlooked twin. I was the one who had demanded recognition and received it. The house was quiet once my parents had left. Their departure felt heavy, like the final echo of a storm, but in that silence I felt something else: lightness. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to exhale fully, to release the tension I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. I sank onto the couch, plaque in hand, and let the events of the evening settle in. I replayed the confrontation in my mind, the calm firmness in my voice, the weight of my words, the subtle yet undeniable shift in my parents' demeanor. I felt the rush of validation, not from vengeance or cruelty, but from truth finally acknowledged. For years I had internalized their favoritism, wondering if I'd done something wrong, if I wasn't enough. But tonight proved otherwise. My achievements had their own gravity, independent of their recognition. People outside my family had noticed me, celebrated me, and respected me. And in that quiet acknowledgement, I finally understood my own worth. I glanced around the living room, the familiar spaces that had once felt suffocating, and saw them differently. Each corner, each object carried memories of neglect and comparison. But now, those memories were reframed. They were proof of resilience, evidence of a journey I had survived and mastered. The quiet victories, the promotions, the accolades, the subtle, well-planned exposure. They weren't just accomplishments. They were a reclamation of my life. I thought about my sister. Her reaction at the gala had been fleeting but telling. Envy, disbelief, perhaps even begrudging admiration. And though I felt no glee in her discomfort, I recognized the poetic symmetry. For the first time, the world saw me, not just as the overlooked twin, but as someone capable, powerful, and undeniable. A small smile crept across my face. Relief mingled with empowerment. The anger and frustration I had carried for years were no longer burdens. They were fuel transformed into action, strategy, and growth. I was no longer defined by the limitations others had imposed on me. I had surpassed them quietly, with precision and dignity. I leaned back, letting the emotions wash over me. Empathy for my younger self, who had endured neglect silently. Pride in my patience and cunning, which had allowed me to orchestrate recognition without resorting to vindictiveness. Gratitude for the small victories that had laid the foundation for this moment. The $10 gift card that had once symbolized humiliation now seemed almost comical, a marker of how far I had come. It reminded me that adversity can be a catalyst, that being underestimated is sometimes the universe's way of preparing you for a larger stage. For the first time in my life, I felt whole, not because my parents had changed, not because my sister acknowledged me fully, but because I had claimed my power. I had turned neglect into strategy, invisibility into visibility, resentment into triumph. And that, more than any gift or accolade, was mine to keep. I sat there for a long moment, plaque on my lap, phone buzzing with messages from friends, colleagues, and mentors. Their admiration and respect reinforced what I already knew. I was seen. I was valued. I was unstoppable. Tonight I was no longer the overlooked twin. I was the woman who had risen from the shadows, who had taken control of her narrative, and who would never again allow anyone's favoritism to define her worth. And in that realization, I smiled fully, freely, at last. The weeks after the confrontation settled into a new rhythm. Life wasn't perfect. My parents still hadn't fully acknowledged the years they had neglected me, but that no longer mattered. For the first time, I pursued my dreams on my own terms, without waiting for validation from the people who had once determined my self-worth. I enrolled in an advanced creative writing course, something I had long dreamed of but had always postponed in the shadow of my family's favoritism. I spent evenings painting, writing, and planning projects that excited me, not because anyone else would notice, but because they fulfilled me. Each brushstroke, each paragraph, each new skill learned was a testament to the life I was finally claiming for myself. Occasionally, I caught glimpses of my parents' awkward glances during family gatherings. They tried, in small ways, to praise me, but the words felt late, empty, or insufficient. I didn't resent them anymore. I had long since realized that I didn't need their approval. The empowerment I felt came from within, from the years of patience, cunning, and perseverance that had led me to this point. I thought about my sister, too. Our relationship had shifted subtly. There was still tension, still envy and confusion lingering beneath the surface. But there was also recognition, however grudging, of my capabilities. I didn't seek reconciliation or rivalry. I simply accepted that we existed in separate spaces of influence, and that I had finally carved out my own. Sometimes, I still remembered the $10 gift card from graduation, that symbol of neglect and favoritism. I smiled when I thought of it, not with bitterness, but with the quiet satisfaction of knowing how far I had come. That small, humiliating token had marked the beginning of a journey that would lead to this moment. A life defined by my own choices, my own success, and my own sense of worth. Evenings were now mine, unclaimed by comparison or expectation. I reveled in small victories, subtle recognition from colleagues, friends, and the community, milestones achieved on my own merits. Each success reinforced a truth I had come to embrace. I was enough, I was capable, and I could thrive without anyone else's permission. It was bittersweet. My family's eyes still held traces of the favoritism that had shaped my youth, and some wounds would never fully close, but I no longer needed closure from them. My growth, my empowerment, and my ability to stand independently were the real victories. And as I sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker like tiny stars, I felt a calm certainty. I had emerged from the shadows, claimed my narrative, and built a life on my own terms. This was my triumph, quiet, steady, and complete. It wasn't immediate, but eventually, the consequences of their favoritism started to ripple outward. I heard about it first through whispers at family gatherings and subtle comments from friends and acquaintances who had attended the same events I had shown at. People were noticing, quietly, the disparity between the attention my sister received and the accomplishments I had achieved. At a recent charity event, my mother tried to mingle with the same crowd I had impressed months earlier. She smiled politely, handed out introductions, but I could see it, the slight awkwardness in her posture, the fleeting looks of recognition from people who now associated my name with success, influence, and competence. Her attempts to bask in reflected glory fell flat. She had spent years elevating my sister while ignoring me, and now she couldn't ride the coattails of my accomplishments. My father fared no better. At a networking dinner, he tried to casually mention my sister's achievements, expecting admiration or acknowledgement. Instead, the conversation turned subtly toward me. "Oh, protagonist's name?" "I heard about her recent promotion and the gala feature. Impressive work," someone said. My father's smile faltered. A polite nod, a quick exit. He had learned, quietly but unmistakably, that his favoritism had created a gap he could no longer bridge. Even within family circles, the dynamics had shifted. Friends and relatives who once praised my sister unreservedly now included me in conversations, asking questions, complimenting milestones, and seeking advice. The quiet irony wasn't lost on me. Their own choices had unintentionally elevated me above the very child they had always celebrated as the golden one. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The payoff was in the subtle glances, the polite corrections, the unspoken acknowledgement that my presence and my worth could no longer be ignored. It was a slow, steady vindication, an external validation that complemented the internal empowerment I had already achieved. Sometimes, I imagined my parents reflecting on their past decisions, the birthdays forgotten, the achievements dismissed, the favoritism wielded like a weapon. Now, in social spaces where influence and respect mattered, they were reminded that neglect and underestimation come with consequences. Not catastrophic, not cruel, but ironic, precise, and quietly satisfying. And for me, observing this from a distance reinforced every lesson I had learned. Resilience, patience, and strategic action yield the sweetest victories. I had not only reclaimed my life and self-worth, but I had also witnessed the karmic balance of their choices unfold in real time. The best part? I didn't have to lift a finger. Recognition, respect, and consequences had arrived naturally, aligned with truth and fairness. And as I moved forward, my smile was calm, knowing that justice, quiet, intelligent, and inevitable, had been served. I sat by the window one evening, watching the city lights shimmer like a constellation of possibilities. It had been months since the gala, since the quiet reckoning with my parents, since the moment I finally claimed my worth. And yet the journey still felt fresh in my mind, each memory a thread woven into the tapestry of who I had become. I thought about the years of neglect, the small slights, the constant comparisons to my sister. At the time, they had felt like weights, dragging me down, filling me with doubt. But now I saw them differently. Each disappointment, each overlooked achievement, had been a lesson in resilience. Every moment of favoritism had forced me to cultivate patience, strategy, and self-belief. I smiled, remembering the $10 gift card from graduation, a symbol of humiliation that had unexpectedly become the spark for everything that followed. It was ironic, almost poetic, that such a small, dismissive gesture could ignite a fire that propelled me into recognition, respect, and empowerment. Looking back, I realized the real victory wasn't just the public accolades or the social acknowledgement. It was the growth I had nurtured quietly, the confidence I had built in the shadows where no one else could see. I had learned to rely on myself, to define my own worth, and to pursue my dreams without needing permission. The journey hadn't erased the pain entirely. Some scars remained, reminders of what I had endured, but they no longer weighed me down. They were proof of my strength, markers of the obstacles I had overcome. The humiliation, the neglect, the favoritism, they had been transformed into lessons, tools for my future, and fuel for my ambition. I thought of my sister, my parents, and everyone who had underestimated me, not with anger, but with a quiet satisfaction. I had moved beyond resentment, stepping into a space of empowerment where their opinions no longer dictated my value. I had reclaimed my life on my own terms, and in that reclamation, I found freedom. Freedom to dream, to create, to thrive. Freedom to pursue my passions without guilt or hesitation. Freedom to celebrate myself fully, knowing that validation now came from within, not from those who had once overlooked me. As the night deepened, I felt a calm certainty settle over me. I had turned neglect into motivation, invisibility into visibility, and resentment into strategy. I had emerged stronger, wiser, and more confident than ever before. I knew there would still be challenges ahead, but for the first time, I welcomed them. I had learned that my worth was mine alone to claim, and no one could take that away. The journey had been long, painful, and sometimes lonely, but it had led me here, fully seen, fully capable, and fully alive. And as I watched the city glow, I felt a quiet smile form. I had stepped out of the shadows and into my own light, and this time, no one could dim it.